So I'm gonna go back to the browser. That's another reason I like Scratch is that it's browser based. You're gonna see that most of the tools that I tend to use are browser based. The reason I like that is because it means you can open it on any computer anywhere, and work on what you're working on. So we don't have to worry so much about having the right programs and the right setup. Okay, so I'm gonna open a new tab, and I'm just gonna Google Scratch. Forget this is a link, scratch.mit.edu. I'll put a link here for this in a second, and I'll link it in the video as well. So Scratch, it will let you save your files on their website. So unlike Piskel, where you have to download your files, in Scratch you can just save them there. You can download them as well if you want to have a backup, but you can save them on your computer, and then or you can save them in the cloud, and then you'll be able to access them anywhere else. So if you haven't used Scratch before, you're going to have to click join, obviously. You're going to create a username and a password, and then it's going to take you through some steps, and you'll have to use an email. So you can use your BMCC email, you can use a personal email, whichever you want. It doesn't really matter. You just need an email to confirm your account. And use a password that you'll be able to remember or write it down or whatever. I already have an account, so I'm going to go to sign in. And I'm going to go over some of the basics before we upload our image. Okay. So when you first log into Scratch, there's a whole bunch of different things that you can take a look at. The nice thing about Scratch, for example, like if you want to look at a project, I'm just clicking on a random project that somebody created. But the thing that's cool about this is there's two buttons here, Remix and See Inside. So this is part of how Scratch is designed. Is it's a learning tool, but it's also a media tool. So in order to be able to learn from other people's projects, they allow you to do these two things. Remix is to make your own version of the project, so you can get all their code and their setup, and then you can add your own art and your own choices, and do stuff. Or you can just click See Inside, and it'll actually show you all the code for that project. Okay, so we can run the project and see how it works. This is a little game. I can move my guy around and I can shoot these little thingies. Pretty basic, but it looks pretty good. So I can play the game, and then I can look at all the code and how it was set up. So these are all the sprites that were used. And then if we click on the player, you can see this is all the code that makes it work. So you can learn from other people's projects, and you can also just recreate it. You can make your own copy of it and do whatever you want. So these are some examples of some blocks of code. So we're going to add some of these in today. This is a visual coding language. So there are little boxes where we have to type stuff, but most of what we do is drag and drop, and there's different sort of blocks that have different functionalities, and we combine them together to build more sophisticated functionalities. So that's an example of a project. Let's go back to the home page. So there's lots of featured projects. There's all sorts of different stuff you can look at. There's tutorials. You can go to the Explore page and find all sorts of stuff. The Ideas page has lots of tutorials and starter projects. So there's a lot of stuff on here that's really useful for learning. We're going to go over to Create, and we're just going to go over a couple basic things. Any questions so far? Okay, that's fine. If you guys need to use the bathroom, that's fine. You don't have to ask. Okay. So, as I mentioned, we have two main goals for today. One is to add the art for our character, and the other is to move the character. I'm going to show you guys a few basic things and how they work, And then I'm gonna let you guys kind of play around with it and explore and see if you can get it set up. So the way that Scratch is broken down, we have a few basic windows. This preview window is like our game window. It shows us like what the game looks like. If I click this green flag, it runs the game. We haven't written any code, so nothing happens when I do that. And if you hit this red stop button, that stops the game. Down here, there's two parts. There's the sprite and the stage. The stage is like the background, so you can add background images there. We'll probably do that a little bit later. The sprite window is where you create the objects in the game, and everything that is part of the game gets made there. So the player, that's what we're going to focus on first, but we're going to add objects for the player to collect or avoid, and we'll add those as sprites as well. You can add a new sprite by clicking here. We're going to upload our sprite, but you can also get a random sprite. You can paint a sprite, or you can choose a sprite from their sort of image library. And then right now there's only one sprite, but eventually there'll be multiple sprites. And with this sprite, there's a few basic things we can toggle here. You can make it visible or not visible. You can change the name. So we can call this like, player or main sprite. This X and Y change the position. So if I change the X to 100, it moves over. So X is the horizontal axis. Hopefully you guys remember some geometry. Negative 100 goes the other way. So 0, 0 is right in the middle. So if I go Y is 100, he's going to go up. If I say Y is negative 100, he's going to go down. There's also the size. So I can double his size, or I can make it smaller. It's based on 100, so 100 is just the size of the image. If I make it smaller or larger, it's going to scale. But one of the things we'll see is that if we scale the image, it doesn't look that good usually, depending on how we do the art. And then the direction is an angle that we can change. And we can set all this stuff directly right here, but eventually what we're going to want to do is add some code to make the program move the character and change the graphics and do all that stuff. So that's our sprite area. Then the editor area is over here. And the way that Scratch works is we have a bunch of code blocks on the left side here, and we have to add code to a sprite. So when we select a sprite, anything that we put in here is gonna be code that acts on that sprite. So let's look at a couple examples of this, and then we'll add our images. So over here, there's a bunch of different areas for different coding blocks. So motion does what it sounds like, it does motion. Let's do an example. So if I grab this block and I drag it over here, when I click here, it just moves over 10 steps. It just does what it sounds like. This is like a little preview. And notice if I move him all the way over here, then he just goes over there and he's not gonna get reset. So like if I run the game, he's just stuck here. So if I wanna move him back, I can set X to 0, or I can keep clicking on the move button, or I can duplicate it. So if I take this move button and I duplicate it, let's move it over here, and I do -10. Now, when I do this, he goes the other way. Okay, so now I can click here, and I can click here. So that's just one basic functionality. You can preview the functionality by clicking on it in the editor. But most of the time, some event in our program is gonna cause that to happen. So it could be a keyboard press, it could be a mouse press, it could be the game starting. So we're gonna combine blocks together to make that happen. So we can also change the graphics. So for example, if I drag this on here and I click it, we see costume 2. And the graphics are referred to as costumes, and we're gonna add some, but you can name them whatever you want. And so if I duplicate this and put it over here and change this to costume 2, I can go costume 2, costume 1. So this little character just has 2 little frames, and so we can go in between the 2 frames. Okay, so let's leave. We're just gonna leave these here for now. We're gonna go over a few more of these. Okay, we'll skip sound for now, but we're gonna add sound eventually. Okay, so then we have events. Events are when something happens in the game. So that includes the game starting. That's the when green clicked. So let's put when green clicked, and we'll say switch to costume 1. So now if I run the game, nothing happens, but if we switch to costume 2 and then run it again, now it switches to costume 1. So we can connect blocks like this. So I can add another block down here, and then now when I click the green flag, he's gonna switch and then move, and then we can, put another block down here, and so he'll go like that. And we can even put a block down here, and now he's just gonna stay in the same place because we're kind of negating each one. And then if we want to get rid of these, we just drag them away from each other like that. And so the blocks kind of go in a downward direction. So the block, when flag clicked, it doesn't have a top thing because it only starts when we click the flag. It has a little bottom indent, and then we can connect that to any other block. Okay, so those are events. We're gonna go over those in a lot more detail next week. We also have control. This is another thing we'll talk about a lot next week, but if we control lets us kind of like do actions in different ways. We can wait for a certain amount of time. We can repeat an action. We can do an action forever. We can do more complicated stuff, like if something is true, do an action. We'll go over those a lot next week. But let's use wait, because that is pretty simple. So let's connect wait and then these guys and then the green flag. So what do you guys think will happen if I click the green flag right now? All right. Let's see. Nice. Okay. So we can add these together, and then I can duplicate a whole block. Like I can make a whole other block here, and then maybe I'll switch this, and now the costume thing will happen. And then maybe, let's delete these guys. If you want to quickly delete something, just drag it over here. So let's do this twice. So I'll duplicate both of these, and I'll drag this here. And, oh, we need another wait, so let's do that. Let's duplicate this. And let's go like this. Okay, let's get rid of that, And then let's duplicate this. And one more time. And costume 1. Okay, so now we're gonna walk. Oh, I got the order of this wrong. 10. -10. Okay. So he kind of walks forward once, and then he goes back once. So we can add these guys together, and they'll execute in the order that they exist. And if we don't like these, we can just get rid of them. Okay. Sensing, we probably won't talk about today. Operators, not today. Variables, not today. My blocks is where you can take a group of blocks and save them. So actually, let's undo that real quick. So if I drag this over here, or let's make a block. Oh, I guess if I make a block, I thought I could just drag it over here, but yeah. You can make your own blocks so you can you can easily add them to other things. We probably don't need to do that today, so we'll stop there with that for now. So those are kind of the basic blocks. So you'll probably notice that I haven't really explained a lot about like how to actually do what we're doing, and that's intentional. I want you guys to try to figure it out on your own. If you don't figure it out, that's fine. But we'll go over it more later. But I do want to give you guys time to explore on your own. Okay. Last bit is uploading our images. Any questions before we get into that? Everybody's good? Okay. So if we want to change our sprite, we can just delete this guy and start over. So I can X this guy out, and then I can click a new sprite, and it's going to let me do it in different ways. I'm going to upload a sprite because I have some art, and I'm going to go to my art folder. Oh, I'm in the wrong place. Let's go to Documents, MMP 210, Art. I'm going to start with my 1X, and I'm going to open these guys. And, oh, I accidentally uploaded 3 sprites, so that's not what I want to do. So let's X these out. Let's upload a sprite, but I'll just start with sprite 0. And so now if I have the sprite selected and I go to costumes, you can see the sprite here. So notice that this is actually an editor. You can edit this, you can draw on it, you can, paint and do stuff if you want to. You don't need to, of course, but we can see the size of the sprite right here. So if I want to add more images, I can go to this choose costume and upload. And now I'll add my next 2 images. Okay, so this is like, my walking. So I'm going to rename this costume idle. So you guys know like an idle animation in a game is like the character's just standing there. Our sprite is just going to stand there. And then we can have walk 1 and walk 2. So it's good to give descriptive names to the costumes so that when you're building your blocks on the editor, it'll be easy to remember what they are. If you just have sprite 0 through 10, you're not going to remember which costume goes with which. Okay, so that's pretty much all you have to do. Let's add another sprite that's a little bit bigger so we can see the size difference. So this is sprite 2x, and this is sprite 4x. Okay, let's move sprite 4x over here. So notice the difference in size. Obviously, depending on what your game looks like and how it works, you're going to want to have different sizes of sprites. If I click on sprite 0 and I try to make it the size of one of my other sprites, it looks pretty good at 2x, but if you look really closely, you can see the edges are blurred. If we go to 4x, it still looks okay. You could get away with this, but if you look closely, the edges are a little bit blurred. So it really depends on the context and how, what you want it to look like. But most of the time, you don't really want to change the size of an image that you're using in a multimedia project. What you want to do instead is have the original art be the right size. So I'm going to change this back to 100. And let's just hide these guys for now. And so let's look at our sprite. Actually, I kind of like the 2x guy. Let's do the 2x guy. So let's go back to costumes and upload 2x 1 and 2. And each sprite can have its own code and its own costume. So I can still call this idle, and I can still call this walk 1 and walk 2. Okay. So I've got my sprite, and so now my goal for now is to add animation and movement. So I think I covered everything that you need for this, but I left out a lot of gaps. I'm gonna let you guys play around with it and see how far you get. Oh, one thing that I didn't cover, events. Yes, okay. One thing I didn't cover is key pressed. So let's look at that for a second, and then I'll let you guys go. So key pressed, we looked at clicked, but we didn't look at key pressed. So this is just an event on the keyboard. If you press a key, something's gonna happen. Okay, so if we go to looks and we switch costume, okay, now when I run the game, if I hit the space key, it's already in walk. So let's switch to idle. Oh, okay, this is a good example of why programming is hard. Okay, when clicked, let's switch to idle so we know that it will start at idle, because right now he's on walk. Okay, so I'm gonna hit the thing, and he goes to idle. So I did when clicked start on idle. So that means when the game starts, he's going to be in his idle animation. So now if I hit space, he starts to walk. Okay. So now remember, we need to use other stuff. So remember we had wait, that's going to be useful. Repeat forever might be useful. Our events, we have when clicked, when key pressed. I think that's all we need. And then we have looks, we have our costume, and we have motion. So we have move, turn. We also have set X and set Y. You might want to use those. Or no, we have go to X, Y. So this is another one that might be useful. If we want to center our character at the beginning, we can say when flag clicked, go to X0, Y0. Okay, so now if I start the game, he's going to start in the middle. Okay, so those are just a few examples of things that you might want to use. I'm going to stop here. We have like 25 minutes, 27 minutes until our break. So your goals are add the animation for your character and add movement for the player. That's, you need to finish that by the end of today / into next week. So if you don't finish it immediately, I want you to play around. I want you to try different stuff and see how far you get. But I am obviously going to go over how to do it. Eventually, we'll all do it together. Okay, so we'll stop there for now. Any questions right now other than...
So are we using the character we made last week, or are we making a new one?
You should use the character you used last week, but as you saw, you might need to make some adjustments to make the animation work. But you can get started, and you can always change it if it doesn't look the way you want it to. Okay, other questions? Let me stop the recording and I'll